Hello everybody, welcome back to Let's Play Sword of the Stars 2. In this second episode we are going to set up our game and I'm going to introduce the different playable races so that you have an idea what race you would like to play in your game. This is the map selection screen. In my original Let's Play I played on the Sots first map, Sots being Sword of the Stars. This is a great map. I like it a lot. It is sort of the canon, quote-unquote, map. This is supposed to be the official... I don't know how realistic it is, but certainly in the vicinity of the Sol system, it seems to be fairly realistic. I'm familiar and I recognize a lot of the names of these stars. I don't know if astronomically, here's Sol, you know, the closest system is Alpha Centauri and whatnot. I'd be curious to know to what extent this 3D representation of all these local stars is accurate. But, you know, I choose to believe that it is, right? Because why not? So anyways, this is a great map. If you play this map, you can choose to place the races in by following these instructions, and it will recreate this sort of canon Sword of the Stars universe. Now, I mean, does that matter to you? I mean, sure, why not, right? Why not play it like that? I don't think in this Let's Play, we are going to use this map. I would like to use a different map. I think we're going to play on the Frontiers map. What's nice about this map is so it's a large map. It can accommodate 8 players, so we'll have, you know, one of each of the races present. Everybody starts close together near the center, so it's gonna lead to more... We're not gonna be safe, right? If we had started in a more isolated map, like for example clouds or clusters, everybody kind of starts in their own little pocket, and I want to make this game as challenging as possible because, you know, 4X games, the AI is usually pretty silly, right? So we're gonna jack up the AI as much as we can, and we're also gonna force everybody to be closer together so that we have to deal with the sort of early game powerful AI where it's sort of their initial starting bonuses might actually be scary to us. So we're playing on the Frontiers map. I am going to bump up initial systems and initial technologies, but this is not for me. This is so I have less clicking to do later so that all of the AI races start with 9 planets, 10 initial technologies, and a lot of money. We're also going to bump up the Grand Menaces because these are kind of fun and interesting. The rest is all going to be default. Oh, and another thing to keep in mind is that the starting positions are always the same. And what I mean is that like position 1 is always the same spot on the map, right? So you can choose a different starting position and you'll start in a different place on the map, but it's consistent between playthroughs. It's not randomly selected. And actually, I forget on this map where starting position 1 is, so I guess we'll... Oh wait, no, I do know, because the test game that I played had me at the bottom there. That's an interesting challenge because it means we won't have room to expand. I'm going to pick a random starting position here. Let's go in the middle. Let's pick 5. I forget where this is going to place us, but we'll have fun. We'll discover together. So let's set up all of our opponent races, and we're going to have one of each race, including another Soul Force. So I've decided I'm going to play as the humans for this Let's Play, mainly because they are sort of technological generalists, and we'll have a good chance at basically researching all the technologies, and therefore I can show you basically all of the cool weapons and all the cool things. This is going to be our AI Soul Force player, so I'm just setting the difficulty to hard. Let's talk about Soul Force briefly. So for each race I'm going to talk about, there are a few things you need to know. You need to know how they get around in terms of their faster than light capability, and then you need to know like what their technological preference is, and then you need to know what their ships are like in terms of their loadouts and their strengths and their weaknesses. And there are other details, of course, but those are the main things you need to know. So Soul Force has uses a very unique faster than light system, which is the node drive. It just allows them to zip between stars very quickly, but they can't really choose how to get from point A to point B. They're dependent on pre-existing connections or node lines in space. So that presents a lot of challenges, because sometimes for other races can easily blockade you by just stopping you at certain choke points. Although the other races can't see the node lines, they can kind of see from where your ships are coming, so they can guess and infer, where the human node lines are. But if you're playing as another race, you won't see the human node lines, unless you are, of course, human, in which case everybody shares the same node lines. So that's an interesting challenge. On the upside, the node drive is very fast. So if you're just moving between neighboring systems, for example, it's going to be faster than almost any other race. So that's a very useful feature for us. In terms of their ship designs, in terms of the technology, like I said, humans are generalists, so they have fairly good chances of discovering all technologies. In terms of their ship designs, they're not too expensive. They're not the cheapest, but they're fairly cheap, which is nice. And sort of have average toughness. Their engine sections are maybe a little more exposed. The profile is nice. They're kind of slim ships, so sort of harder to hit, right? They have a low profile. The turret layout is quite acceptable. A lot of forward-facing weapons, also suitable for some broadsides. Yeah, just an overall fairly good design for ships, right? They are very versatile. They can really accommodate a lot of different situations. So yeah, overall, fairly solid race to play. Let's move on to the next one. Okay, we'll set these as the Sulka Horde. By the way, here where it says Immersion, this was, I think, a DLC that I think you basically get when you buy the game. It's just like a reskin of the ship. So if we look here, and I'm going to select now the Sulka Horde, like it's just a nicer reskin of all the ships. So I'm going to, select that just to make the ships nicer. Okay, the Sulka Horde are space zombies, basically. Playing them is a very different experience. So first of all, how they get around in faster than light. They, similar to the humans, travel through node lines, but they can make their own node lines. They have to kind of dig through space with big space bulldozers, I guess, and they create their own node lines, which is tactically and strategically very advantageous. However, they're not as fast as the humans traveling through the node lines. So that's how they do that. Something to mention about node lines, which is true both for Soul Force and for the Zool, is that normally if other species, they travel through space, you can intercept their fleets before they get to your system. However, those other races cannot intercept Soul Force or Zool ships because they're traveling in like node space, I guess. So that's an interesting especially if you're playing in multiplayer, that's an interesting consideration. The Zool technology is very limited in general. If anything, they're good with ballistic weapons, but they have the lowest rates of discovering technology. They make up for this in part by having a bonus to salvage, which is the mechanism that I alluded to in the first video, which allows you to obtain technology by having salvage ships in a system when you defeat others who are using that technology, right? So the Sulka are very good at, they're kind of space zombie scavengers, all right? That's what they are. In terms of other special features, the Sulka don't really have morale, but their maximum tax income is limited. So you can just set their maximum tax is going to be 7, and you can just ignore morale, right? So you just set it to 7 and have fun, right? The other thing is they won't trade with other species because nobody wants to trade with scavenger zombies. And they have another really unique special ability, which is they can build these special stations, which once you get them to level 5, will have a chance to summon a giant... the best way to describe it would be like a giant evil side space monster, which is incredibly powerful, especially in multiplayer, but it's just a very, very powerful thing. We're not gonna. The AI is not gonna do that. Maybe I'll play another game where we show this off. They can be fun to play with, but yeah, that's just something that you should know is out there. Their ships are weak in the toughness sense, so they're kind of squishy, but they are incredibly fast and have a ton of guns. So you saw the Soul Force, they had one heavy turret on their armor cruiser. The Sulka have 4 heavy armor turrets on their, just right out the gate, at the beginning of the game, you have 4 heavy, not heavy armor, just heavy turrets, right? So they have unbelievable firepower, but and unbelievable speed. So basically their strategy is just more guns, right? So an interesting race to play with, technologically challenging. It's also, the economy is a little tricky, and their supply, right? The ships don't have a lot of endurance, so it's hard to logistically get your fleet to where it needs to be. But a ton of guns. Let's move on. Let's see what race is not here. I'm just kind of randomly assigning these. Let's go Morigi. The Morigi are a sort of avian-inspired race. Their faster-than-light drive is a fairly standard, go from point A to point B. They can just choose any destination they want. The special twist is that they will go faster if more ships are flying together. So the larger your fleet, the faster it will travel. Other than that, it's just a fairly simple system. They are technologically, they have a bonus to technology research in general, so they're good at researching technology, and they favor energy weapons, and I would say, so they favor energy weapons, torpedoes, missiles, and drones. Their specialty is drones. We'll get back to that when we talk about their ships. In addition, they also are very good at psi research in this game, so they have a very good chance of unlocking a lot of the psi abilities. In terms of the economy, the special thing you have to remember is that everything with the Morigi is expensive. Their ships are super expensive. It's even expensive for them to colonize planets, right? You have to, there's colony upkeep for planets that you still need to terraform. It's just, everything's expensive with the Morigi. Let's talk about their ships a little bit. Their ships, like I said, very expensive, kind of fragile, not a lot of toughness. They have an interesting layout of the sections on the ships, which is, I think, better. Like, their engine section is very well protected. We'll talk about this maybe more in game later, but, to kill a ship, you need to destroy two out of 3 of the sections. A lot of this targetable area is not the engine section, which is kind of nestled in here. So that's actually kind of an advantage. They have fairly good turret layouts, and like I said, drones are their specialty. Their command ships have drones, their supply ships have drones. So a common tactic with the Morigi is to really double down on that and just have swarms of drones. So that's the Morigi. A fun race to play, as they specialize in drones, but everything is very, very expensive. Okay, next up we have the Huibers. The Huibers is a race that I played in the original Let's Play that I did of this game. I enjoy them very much. The way that they get around in faster than light is very unique. They do not have a faster than light drive, but they can set up gates, which allows instantaneous teleportation between systems. So obviously that's a very powerful ability, but it's vulnerable because you can destroy those gates, right? Later on, they can make gate stations, which are going to be safer, because they're placed near your planets, and also just more sturdy. But still, that can be vulnerable. And in multiplayer, that can be kind of tricky to manage. You can fight effectively against the Huiber by trying to take out their gates and splitting their forces. The Huibers do get the ability to sort of gate jump. Like, eventually you can unlock the technology to sort of warp out about 5 or 10 light years away from a system that has a gate. So that makes life a little bit easier. You don't always have to chug along at sublight speeds. Their technology they're not great at researching technology in general. So they have low chances of unlocking most technologies. They are very good, however, at ballistics, right? And those are definitely their favored kinds of weapons. Their ships are not cheap, not super expensive, but I would not call them cheap. Their ships are the sturdiest of all the race's ships. So they're just flying bricks. They're just very powerful. The weapon layout is okay. They're meant to prefer to do broadsides. So unfortunately, a lot of times when you're chasing down an enemy ship, you really want to focus your fire forwards, right? Fortunately, they have some of the fastest ships in the game, along with the Sulka. The Huibers have very fast ships, but a lot of their firepower is coming out of the sides of their ships, so that can be kind of a bit tricky to use well in a lot of situations. So that's something to keep in mind of. But anyways, a lot of fun to play with. I love the gate mechanic. It's just logistically, it's a pleasure, right? Because it's very easy to move ships around in your empire. And very tough ships. So a good safe bet to play. This is, I forget if I clicked on hearts. Let's do that. This is going to be our race. So we're going to be Soul Force. We're gonna start with the default, whatever, that's close enough. We're gonna start with the normal start, which is no bonus technologies, no initial systems. I'll customize this at the end. Let's move on. Okay, the Lear Zul. Zul is, by the way, Zul is the name of the space zombie race. Sulka, I guess, is the name they call themselves, but everybody calls them the Zul. So why is the Lear Zul Alliance? That's a new thing, I guess, in Sword of the Stars 2. So basically, this race is the Lear. The Lear are, I guess, fishes, right? They're fish. They're space whales, I guess. So let's talk about their faster than light system. It is basically just like the Morigi. Go from wherever you want point A to point B. The twist is that they go much faster when they are far away from a gravity well, when they're far away from stars. So that means if you have to travel from two close by neighboring stars, they're actually painfully slow. And especially in the early game, the Lear are quite slow. However, they will cover a long distance proportionally much faster. Also, they have a fairly unique just propulsion system in the lore. Like, they don't really have engines like that expel matter. They just kind of like teleport very short distances. So in combat, their ships they're sort of average speed, but they're very maneuverable and agile. They can turn on a dime. And sometimes it just looks like they're kind of jittering all about. It can be very, very strange. But so they're very agile ships. Before we get to the ships, let's talk about the technology. Lear are the most, how can I say, they have a very high bonus to tech research, even more than the Morigi. So if you want to play like a tech game, then Lear is the race for you. In terms of weapons, they highly favor the laser and energy-based weapons, so not so strong on ballistics. They also are excellent at psi research. They're excellent at all research, but they have a higher chance of unlocking the psi research is what I'm referring to. So very good for technological research. They're also very good at colonizing planets, so their costs to colonize in terms of terraforming and whatnot are much lower. In terms of ships, like I said, they are very agile. However, they are very fragile. Their ships are not tough. They can get destroyed very easily. Also, you see they're kind of big, right? And so it's very easy to hit them, as opposed to the Soul Force ships, right? They're very kind of large sections, and just very fragile ships in general. Also, they tend to have a lot of small light turrets, which I guess is good for point defense, but they're not bringing the same amount of firepower really as compared to other races. However, they have a special affinity for battle riders, which are these a certain kind of ship which can carry, like a cruiser could carry 3 smaller ships on it called battle riders. Their battle riders are exceptionally powerful. So a very common tactic or strategy to use as Lear would be either using battle riders, so you bring a bunch of carriers into combat and then send your battle riders out to do damage. The battle riders are exceptionally powerful, but that whole setup is vulnerable because if your enemy can get to your carriers, it'll be easy to pick them off. I guess the other strategy is just your ships are vulnerable, but you can research technology much faster than others, so you might show up with squishy ships that have powerful shields, for example. That'll be a way to offset their weakness. So Lear are a lot of fun to play because you can get to technology a lot faster, but you're going to have to rely on well-equipped ships to make up for their general squishiness. Okay, so that's the Lear. Let's double check this. What else? We do not have the Loa. Okay, the Loa are a strange race. They were added in the last expansion that was made for the game called the End of Flesh. The Loa is an AI race. It's just an AI is what it is. The Loa playstyle is very different from the playstyle of all the other races. So first, let's talk about how they get around in space. They can choose to go from point A to point B as they wish, so they travel in normal space. However, what they really do is they build these highways. They build sort of, I guess highways, which costs, it costs some resources to build these highways. And that accelerates the ships so that transit from point A to point B is faster. So the first time you go, you're going to have to build a highway. And after that, the ships kind of get like propelled through this highway. If you don't have a highway, you can still go there, but your ship will gradually lose speed unless it's continuously propelled by this highway that you build in space. So it's kind of a mix, I guess, of the node lines that the Soul Force have, but you also have the freedom to travel anywhere you want, right? Now, and let's talk about their technology quickly. They favor energy weapons, definitely. And in fact, in terms of the lore, there's nothing stopping you from using missiles and kinetic weapons, but as I'll explain in a bit, it wouldn't really make sense for the AI. And the reason is that this race is basically like a master of manipulation of matter and nanotechnology. So when you create ships, you don't actually create a ship. What you build is like cubes, they're called, like nano cubes. And you can reform your fleets at will into whatever design you have already prototyped. So that's very powerful, right? So you can just send a bunch of cubes through space, and then when they get to the system they are, you can just choose what fleet it becomes, right? This is a very unique playstyle. It gives you a lot of flexibility. You can reform your fleet the next turn, right? Suppose you need your fleet to, I don't know, be a more blunt instrument. You can do that. Then you need your fleet to be a colony ship. You can do that too, right? So it's very powerful. There are some sort of annoyances, I guess, and one of the main limitations is that you are limited by the total number of cubes that you can send through the highway at once, and that number really is quite a low number. For example, that number, you can send a maximum of 70,000 cubes at the beginning of the game. And most ships take, in the early to mid game, a good cruiser might be 20,000 cubes. So that means you can only send like a fleet of 3 to 4 ships in the early game, like a well-equipped ship, right? Maybe cheaper ships you could send 4 or 5 through at a time. Now, your early game fleet has 9 ships minimum. You can fit 9 cruisers in a fleet, at the beginning of the game, and very quickly you can get up to 11 cruisers. So the logistics are kind of challenging. You can send a bunch of fleets, but for that first turn when they arrive, you'll only have little fleets to work with. once they arrive, you can rearrange all the fleets together, right? The limitation is only on the highway throughput. You can then reassemble it into one giant fleet afterwards. But the logistics are I find a bit troublesome when playing with Loa. However, the tactical flexibility is really incredible. Also, it's worth mentioning that their cruisers, their ships in general, are much more powerful than the other cruisers. So a Loa cruiser has like 4 heavy turrets, and they're just like, it's not a fair fight, right? If you actually had 9 Loa cruisers, they would almost, at the same technology level, they would almost for sure beat 9 cruisers from another race. So, in that sense, only being able to send 4 or 5 cruisers, on your first attack wave is not the end of the world. But still, the logistics are a bit of a pain to deal with. Okay, so that's... Oh, also the Loa have this other mechanic where they can colonize any planet. When they colonize it, it's more of a matter of stripping all of the life from the planet. And their whole economy is based on energy instead of credits. So really it's quite a unique gameplay. I don't want to spend much more time talking about them, but it's quite a different feel. Maybe not, if you haven't played the game before, maybe not start with the Loa. They might be a bit weird. But very interesting race nonetheless. Finally, we have the Tarka. The Tarka, in some ways, are a very straightforward race. I don't enjoy playing them as much, but they're still. But that doesn't mean they're not good. So first of all, the Tarka. How do they get from point A to point B? Very easy. They just have a hyperdrive. Where do I want to go? You just point and click, and they go there. Nothing special. They just go. So that's great. They also eventually get the. They also eventually get the ability to sort of turn around. You can issue them new orders while they're in transit, which is very useful. That's a bit later in the game. In terms of technology, the Tarkasians heavily favor ballistic weapons, so that's something to keep in mind. In terms of their ships, they have, I think, very good ship designs. First of all, you'll notice their basic cruiser has 2 heavy turrets, which is fantastic. Their turrets almost all face forward. So this is, generally speaking, excellent, because in almost all situations you're chasing down enemies. They have pretty good speed too. You're chasing down enemies and you want all your guns to bear forward, and the Tarkasian designs are designed to do that. Everything faces forward. Now, this is in most situations great, but sometimes it's awful, right? Because they're in a big brawl, in a big melee. Other races are going to be able to shoot in all directions. The Tarka ships have to constantly realign. Also, their point defense coverage suffers a lot, because even their light mounts, which is where your point defense comes from, have very limited firing arcs. So generally it's very strong. However, it really does have some limitations you have to keep in mind. Yeah, other than that, they do have... It says here they have stealth technology, but that's not really used that often. They have a special kind of battle rider too, which again is not really a big deal. They're sort of minor details. A very solid choice. Very powerful ships with good profiles, a good very low profile. A very strong choice overall. So that's a brief overview of all of the races. Very unique play styles. If you are new to the game and want to have just a very basic first race to play with, I think the Tarka are a good choice, even though I don't personally like their style. The Tarka are a good choice. Soul Force is also a good choice, but it's a different style because you're restricted to the node lines, right? So you might find that frustrating because you're going to have enemies coming at you from directions where you can't, reply in kind. I think going with one of the simpler species, maybe Lear would be also a good choice because the technology progression through the tech tree will be easier. You might find that their slow ships in the early game are a bit of a pain, though. A race that has very simple, faster than light mechanics, I think would be a good choice at first, although Soul Force might still work well for you. Anyways, so that's an overview of all of the races in the game. We've gone on quite long for this video. Let's finish customizing our race, and then we will get started. So I changed this. Let's choose the avatar here. I think I like the yellow color because it's gonna stand out more in the video. So I think we're going to let's see. Let's make our Empire color yellow, and then let's choose as our second color maybe a red or a blue. Oh, we could go a yellow and kind of a deep purple, I think might look nice. Sure, why not? And then, do we have an appropriate badge? Yeah, for sure. We have to do this badge. Let's see, is there an avatar that we could, I like this one. That one matches there. I think we just go based on the hairstyle. Oh, or we could be Captain Janeway here. I just think she looks like Janeway. I don't know. Do we go with Captain Janeway? Sure, let's do it. All right. Difficulty won't matter because we're not an AI race. We've got our color. We've got, I mean, the Empire name doesn't really matter. Let's make sure we've got one of everybody. Soul Force, Sulka, Morigi, Huiber, Virzul, Loa. Good, I think we're all set. So let us start the game, and I'll see you in the next episode when we actually get started on the Let's Play. Thank you everyone for watching. I hope to see you soon. Take care.